Good evening. The Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District Board of Trustees is now convened in a board work session on Monday, June 21st, 2021 at 6 p.m. in the boardroom of the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District Instructional Support Center located at 10,300 Jones Road, Houston, Texas, for the purpose of reviewing that portion of the Thursday, June 24th, 2021 regular board meeting agenda designated as action items to hear designated reports and recognitions posted in the meeting notice as required by Texas law. I want to welcome the members of our audience and our television viewers to this meeting of the Board of Trustees. As the Cypress-Fairbanks Board of Trustees, we are here to set goals, listen to reports, approve budgets, contracts, personnel appointments, and make policy for the district. It is not the role of the board to make day-to-day operational decisions. The management and day-to-day operations of the district are the responsibility of the superintendent. We have policies and procedures in place to resolve concerns and issues. This is a public meeting of the Board of Trustees, not a meeting of the public. Prior to this meeting, board members received information related to the items on tonight's agenda. Agenda items will not necessarily be handled in the order listed on the notice. The meeting is open to all who wish to attend and hear the matters discussed. During the course of this meeting, the board may determine that a closed session is necessary. In that event, the board will meet in closed session to consider matters duly posted for this meeting as permitted by sections 551.071 and 551.084 of the Texas Government Code. These proceedings are airing live on Comcast Channel 16 and the district website. They will also be available as video on demand on the district website following tonight's meeting. For the video to adequately reflect the proceedings, I respectfully ask that you please refrain from talking while others are speaking and that cell phones are turned off or in silent mode, just like I'm going to have to do right now. So please turn off your phones. Thank you for taking time to join us this evening and for your interest in the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District. I would also like to take this opportunity to recognize Community Leadership Committee members who are here in attendance, and we don't have any. So they're recognized, but they're not here. The invocation, pledge of allegiance, vision and mission statement, recognitions, board comments, and citizen participation portion of the agenda will be presented at the regular board meeting on Thursday, June 24th, 2021. At this time, we will proceed with the public comments portion of the agenda. Patrons who are duly registered per policy BED local may address the board and make public comments on an agenda item during or before the board's consideration of the item. The board may allow public comment on agenda items at all meetings. The board will continue with the remaining agenda after the registered patrons have had an opportunity to speak. To participate, registration is between 5:30 and 5:50 on the day of the board meeting at the entrance of CFISD boardroom. Tonight we have three speakers. We will start with Ashley Smith. Ashley, come up to the podium on the right. There is a light that's going to go off when you start, and you're given 2 minutes to talk. At 30 seconds before, the yellow light will come on, and when the red light comes on, please summarize what you've got. Okay? It's all yours, Ashley.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't expect to be first. Hi, my name is Ashley Smith. I am a middle school teacher here in Cypress, as well as a taxpayer in the district. I'm here speaking on budget. 2020 was a very telling year. My workload multiplied by 4. I started the previous year teaching one mode. This last year was 2 modes. The previous year I had 1 content prep, and this last year I had 2 content preps. Also, our contract was extended by 8 days, I believe. And our compensation last year was increased by approximately 1.5%, less than the cost of living. So the purchasing power of my base compensation decreased. This happened while I saw antidepressants and panic attacks become a way of life for my coworkers and I. I'm here to say that the value proposition of teaching as a profession hit a new low in 2020. This year, from my understanding, the proposed annual increase is again less than the cost of living and is completely consumed by increases in health insurance that seems to be ranging in increases between 5 and 8%. In addition, it's my understanding that class size minimums for next year are increasing and teachers are being excessed. The profession is slowly eroding to the point that serious professionals will think twice. And it's my understanding that many have left the profession, and I believe that many more will also follow. Cyfair is quickly falling behind other districts in the metro area with compensation. Every problem every year gets flushed downstream to teachers. Teachers always carry the burden. Please do the right thing for teachers this year in Cypress-Fairbanks ISD.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Donna Lord.
Good evening. I'm Donna Lord, president of Cypress TSTA NEA. I'm a proud Cook Middle School teacher and a taxpayer in the district. As you consider the budget being proposed tonight, we want you to think about a few things. Professions in the private sector with the same level of education have higher levels of compensation than your teaching staff. In fact, it can be argued that your teaching staff has greater education because of the required professional development and trainings that we attend each and every year. Your teaching staff is primarily made up of women, many without spouses. If your teaching staff were made primarily of men, would we be having these conversations about adequate compensation? Would we still be having these conversations about the district not contributing enough towards the insurance premiums? I don't think so. You increased our workday by 15 minutes, which amounts to roughly 47 additional hours per year with no additional compensation, all on top of the untold hours the teachers already put in off contract, tutoring, grading papers, the list goes on. We worked through a pandemic, most of us teaching both in-person and Connect students, with the only acknowledgement being a retention bonus of $500 and some kind words from the board and senior administration. You are exploiting your teaching staff. It's time to step up and show us the respect that we deserve. I want you to think long and hard about who's actually doing the heavy lifting in this district and start compensating us adequately. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Paul Langoni. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Langoni, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good night. My name is Paul Langoni, and I'm a Cyfair TSTA membership chair and a middle school teacher in the district. I would like to talk to you today about pay scale increase for all staff in the district for the upcoming 2021-2022 school year. A significant amount of our staff, I might add, are single-income households. On June 16th, the Federal Reserve estimated an inflation rate median of 3.4% by year's end, with the high-end range in excess of 3.9%. Let's not forget our medical insurance for the upcoming school year is increasing 5.5 to 8% depending on the policy you have. Based on my personal insurance increase of 5.5% and an inflation estimate of roughly 3.4%, I would need roughly a 3.75% pay increase just to keep up with inflation and insurance premiums. Please also understand that our ESPs on average make lower pay than the average teacher. Teachers and ESPs make up most of our staff in the district. Most of us in the district depend on at least a minimum cost of living pay increase just to stay afloat. An actual raise beyond inflation and cost of living increases isn't unreasonable. Teachers and ESPs in Cyfair ISD have never worked so hard before. We need these raises. Teachers make far less than other professionals with similar levels of education. Yet, without teachers, these other professions would not exist. Employees need to feel valued and appreciated. One of the many ways to show that is by increasing the pay of teaching and educational support staff by at least 5%. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we proceed with the reports portion of the agenda, I would like to let the viewing audience know that each month during the board work session, the administration provides oral reports on various departments in addition to the reports outlined in the district's board monitoring system. The board monitoring system, a mechanism to measure the district's progress in achieving goals, may be viewed on our website under Our District /About CFISD /Know Your District /District Improvement Plan /Goals. And now we will proceed with the reports. 7A, the administration will provide a written report on the School Health Advisory Council, SHAC, annual activities. Presenters, we have questions only for either Roy Garcia or Bevan Gardner. Do we have any questions, board? Seeing none, we'll move on to 7B. The administration will present an oral report on the budget for the 2021-2022 school year and the ESSER 2 and 3 spending plans. Presenters are Karen Smith, Teresa Hull, and Dr. Linda Macias. Karen?
Thank you, President Covey and Dr. Henry. Today I will be presenting the 2021-22 proposed budget. Let's see. Sorry, I was waiting for the clicker. Thank you. Sorry about that. Since the receipt of the federal funding will impact the proposed budget, administration will also discuss the federal funding available as well as the district's ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 spending plans. Before I start on this presentation, I'd like to take a moment and thank Amanda Bowles, who's here, as well as Melissa McInerney, Patrice Lang, and Firmino Mariano. They all worked very hard to make this budget work. Before we discuss the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 spending plans and the proposed budget, I will provide you an update on the COVID-19 cost and the status of the federal funding. Additional costs to respond to the pandemic and address learning loss, coupled with lost revenues, have totaled $123.5 million, of which $62.9 million has impacted the general fund as of May 31st, 2021. Payroll increases include the Lead Safely stipend for employees of $8.3 million paid in December of 2020, and the retention stipend that will be paid to substitutes and temporary workers sometime, I believe, this next week. Also included in the payroll are supplemental pay, overtime for technology nurses, operations police, and registrars. A majority of the non-payroll costs were for implementing the one-to-one devices, and that was paid from bond funds. Some of the lost revenues include lost revenue due to interest income, as well as our food service operations due to lower a la carte sales and lower participation, as well as facilities use and concessions, catering, and then community programs. I would like to provide you an update on the federal funding created through the various stimulus packages. The Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, or ESSER as you will hear me call it, have been created under 3 different stimulus packages. As you are aware, the ESSER 1 funds were utilized by the state to supplant state aid in 2019-2020. The district drew down about $2.3 million in 1920 of the eligible amount, saving the remainder $15.4 million to help offset the deficit the district expected to realize in 2020-21. The ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 entitlements have now been released to districts. If you recall, we did not know anything about the ESSER II amount when I presented to you in May. Districts can now apply for the ESSER II grant and 2/3 of the ESSER III grant. The state is seeking clarity from the U.S. Department of Education related to the remaining 1/3 of the ESSER III grant before they will release that entitlement. But we'll go into a little more detail on this funding in a few minutes. On June 1st, the district received a little over $7 million from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Districts could be reimbursed for about 75% of eligible cost, which for the district, what we turned in was about $10.1 million. So we got about 75% of it, and it was for cost incurred from March 1st, 2020 through May 20th, 2020. And of course, as you well know, a majority of our costs were incurred after that point in time. The district is still waiting on reimbursement for costs through the Coronavirus Relief Fund Prior Purchase Reimbursement Program, and this is where we requested reimbursement for some of our devices, one-to-one devices, as well as Wi-Fi and hotspots. As of the May board meeting, the district had only received $742,474 from the Provider Relief Fund. So I guess you could say by getting this additional $7 million, we've made progress, and the fact that the ESSER II funds have been released. Recently, a funding opportunity was also announced through the Emergency Connectivity Fund program, where the district could be reimbursed for some of our technology equipment next year, as well as our Wi-Fi service that we will be providing to students that need that Wi-Fi connectivity. So now I would like to discuss the ESSER II and ESSER III spending plans. The ESSER II grant program requires that districts spend a minimum of 20% on evidence-based interventions, such as summer learning and after-school programs, and ensure that the interventions respond to students' academic, social, and emotional needs. Also address the disproportionate impact of the coronavirus on underserved populations. Another requirement of the ESSER III grant is to engage stakeholders and provide the opportunity for public input. So you will see here that it's students, families, campus and district administrators, including special education administrators, teachers, principals, school leaders, other educators, campus staff, and then the disability organization, as well as groups that work with English language learners. So some of the considerations that we need to that you might want to take into, or we had to consider as far as determining the uses of the ESSER funds, is the ESSER grant funds are one-time funds. Districts, in fact, must acknowledge in the grant application that the ESSER funding is one-time funding and ensure the board is informed that this funding is non-recurring. Districts should have a plan to adjust when funding is no longer available, and Cy-Fair is very fortunate because we can easily adjust. We are so large, so we can adjust, as for example, the number of staff that we hire in a year when the funding runs out. So we are easily able to do that. The deadline for the use of the ESSER II funds is September 30th, 2023, and then September 30th, 2024 for the ESSER III funds. The district can also be reimbursed for pre-award costs, and what those are costs that are incurred from March 13th, 2020 to the date the district receives the notice of grant award, and that's the approval of our application, in case you're not familiar with that. Also, the ADA hold harmless offered in 2021 will not continue to be offered. TEA will use a portion of the ESSER II funds that was released to supplant the hold harmless for school districts. I shared at the May board meeting that the hold harmless did not make CFISD whole, and we now will have to use a portion of the ESSER II funds to reimburse ourselves for the hold harmless. The district will not know the exact amount of the ESSER II funds that will be replaced until the Summers Peen submission is done, and then TEA has a final determination that will be done in September. However, we are estimating, hopefully, that we will receive a minimum of 30% of these ESSER funds, and the total amount was $84.3 million, so we're hoping we'll receive at least 30% of that or more. The ESSER grant may also be used to supplant existing spending to free up money for a raise for all employees. ESSER 3 has an additional maintenance of equity requirement, and basically what that is whenever we supplant funds, we want to make sure that we don't take away or supplant more at a high poverty campus than a low poverty campus, and making sure that equity is there. There is quite a bit of flexibility associated with the spending of the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funding. There's 20 available activities that can be reimbursed. Some of those activities are anything that's allowable under the ESSA or the IDEA or the Adult Education Family Literacy and the McKenty-Vento Homeless and Perkins Act grants. I won't go through all of these, but you can see it's there to address like learning loss, retention of staff, as well as mental health interventions and support. And also it can be utilized for technology. So the district had to obtain, as I indicated earlier, stakeholder input associated really with the ESSER 3 grant, and really it's, you're supposed to have public comment associated with any federal grant. So what the district did is they had a survey that was posted on the district's website to attain public input. In addition, it was also emailed to all stakeholders such as employees, parents, the community members. Administration also met with these following groups. We've presented several times to the Board of Trustees. We presented to the principals, as well as curriculum and instruction. We consulted with them, as well as counseling, psychological services. We also met with the Community Leadership Committee twice to discuss the ESSER funds. And then teacher organizations, the District Education Improvement Council, or DEIC, as well as the Lead Safely Committee, the District Leadership Team, and Special Education Parent Advisory Group. Right, this is just shows you what the survey looked like, the stakeholder input survey that was posted on the district's website and emailed to stakeholders. You'll notice on the left side, the respondents indicated which role or roles applied to them. For example, a person completing the survey could be a parent, a CFISD teacher, a CFISD employee, and then also represent a child with disabilities. For the items listed on the right, they reflect the allowable uses of funds. And basically, all these items listed here included but one of those 20 allowable uses within it. The individual completing the survey was requested to indicate if the item was low need, moderate need, or high need. So this is the results of the stakeholder input survey. We had a total of 14,070 responses, which is the highest number of responses on a survey that we have ever conducted. Our top 3 groups responding were parents, teachers, and employees. On this slide, you can see the top 4 areas of need listed by those who took the survey. First is addressing student learning loss. Second was the retention of staff. And the third is technology. And then the fourth is mental health interventions and support. And these responses really is exactly what we would have expected that would have been selected. The yellow represents high need, the blue represents a moderate need, and the green represents a low need. So what are next steps? First of all, we will be presenting to the board after this. We'll have this presentation, and the board will be approving the budget for the 2021-20, or we'll ask the board to approve the budget for the 2021-22 school year on Thursday. Also, we will be submitting the ESSER 2 grant prior to the deadline of July 27th, 2021. ESSER 3, apologize. And then submitting the ESSER 2 grant by the deadline, and we will submit that to TA in time, and that deadline is September 2nd, 2021. So now I'd like to go over the proposed budget. I want to remind you again of the primary factors involved in the budget. And really, before I go over that, I would like to just share with you remind you that we have to annually adopt a budget for the general fund, the debt service fund, and the food service fund. We're also required to have a public hearing related to the budget, and that public hearing will be immediately following this presentation. The different items that were considered, or the primary factors in influencing the budget, was the decline in student enrollment. The district was very conservative in our estimates and on staffing based on enrollment until we see if our students will be returning. As you know, our decline was mostly in pre-K and K. Also addressing the student learning loss, as well as responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, the outcomes of the 87th legislative session, as well as increases in property values. Not only does the increase in property values affect our tax collections, but it also affects the compression of our maintenance and operations tax rate, which I'll go into more detail in a moment. The budget was built on four primary goals: preserving the quality of instruction and services, recruiting and retaining quality staff, prioritizing student and staff safety, as well as protecting the district's operational infrastructure. It was anticipated in the 87th legislative session that they would kind of leave school finance alone and concentrate on other matters such as redistricting, but if you probably have already heard, that really was not the case. So I'd like to quickly go over House Bill 1525 that was passed in the 87th legislative session, and it was often referred to as the House Bill 3 cleanup bill. And some of the highlights was it restored the gifted and talented allotment. As a reminder, this allotment was rolled into the basic allotment as part of House Bill 3. And the good news, I guess you could say, is we've gotten the gifted and talented allotment back, and they did not reduce the basic allotment because they gave it back to us. That's the good news about it. However, it will be capped at a statewide limit. And that is something House Bill 1525 did with several other allotments, is you've got the allotment, but it's capping how much it is. And if you get to that cap, then it's basically proration related to that particular allotment, and it's reduced proportionately. But if the district is able to receive the total amount, it's about another $2.3 million to the district related to the gifted and talented allotment. It also establishes 3 funding tiers for the career and technology allotment. At this time, it appears our funding will be very similar to what it is now, and it's not going to make that big of a difference for us. It also modifies the fast growth allotment to where a district must realize growth beyond 250 students. I don't know if you recall, but there was a district that actually got the fast growth allotment, and they only grew by 2 students because they met this percentage. While our district, if you compared us the same year, which was 2019-2020, we grew by about 900 students. So this, so that they realized, the legislature, that there was an issue associated with that, and it is easier for a district to earn that fast growth allotment. Right now, we kind of go in and out depending on what we look at. I've seen anywhere from 200,000 to about 700,000 right now if we got anything on the fast growth allotment. It also creates a grant program from the commissioner's ESSER funding. It also prohibits districts from levying an M&O tax rate to pay debt. And this is often referred to you've heard the term tax swap maybe. This is different from when the district was allowed to adopt disaster pennies or additional maintenance and operation pennies to offset the cost of Hurricane Harvey. But in the 87th legislation, Senate Bill 1438 was passed, removing pandemics from being a disaster. Therefore, we don't have the opportunity to use the pandemic to get additional disaster pennies that would assist us with those costs. It also prohibits districts from reducing the salary increases provided in 2019-2020, and it creates a reimbursement program for Winter Storm Uri. We really don't know what that grant program will look like, but it might help us. We have about $1.2 million that was not covered by our insurance. Also, it specifies that the teacher incentive allotment compensation is TRS eligible, which is good for our teachers. The 21-22 budget includes funding for a salary increase of 3% on the greater of midpoint or base, and an increase in the teacher starting salary from $56,000 to $58,000 for a cost of $24.6 million. The board has graciously provided a raise for all employees for the last 9 years. Also it includes hotspot Wi-Fi as well as Amazon Web Services for $4 million. This is an item the district could utilize some of our federal funding to cover. And then a net increase in teacher retirement, software licenses, consultants, and other miscellaneous items for a total of $3.2 million. According to House Bill 3, school district M&O tax rates will be compressed to the lower the state compressed rate or the local compressed rate when property values increase more than 2.5%. So basically, the more property values grow, the lower the tax rate would compress. Prior to House Bill 3, state aid was based on prior year values and there was a funding lag. Now, with current values, there is no longer this funding lag. Since local property values are projected to increase by more than 2.5% by the Harris County Appraisal District, and local property values appear to be increasing more than the statewide average or local values, the current M&O tax rate will likely decrease in tax year 2021. Districts will report their property values in late July to the Texas Education Agency, and they actually calculate what our local compressed rate is the first week of August. State funding is based on the current year state comptroller's values, and those we do not know, until 21-22 is actually complete. It's completely after that before we actually know what those values are. So as you can see, it's based on estimates. Some other considerations associated with the budget is that administration will be applying for reimbursement for a majority of Cy-Fair's COVID-19 costs that were incurred both in 2021 as well as 21-22. And this would be, the ones in 21-22 would be existing costs that the district would be incurring through, and we would hope to receive that through the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grants that would offset a majority of the anticipated deficits both in the current year as well as the upcoming year. The Texas Education Agency has announced that districts cannot recode any of their costs against the ESSER grants until we receive the notice of grant award. And so I just wanted to mention that to you because it's possible the district might reflect a deficit in 2021 that we can't allocate those costs against in 2021. They'll actually hit in 21-22, and we'll have a bigger gain in 21-22. So you have to look at the 2 years combined versus 1 year at a time. And it could include the cost associated with the pandemic, as well as hold harmless and state funding might be reduced and offset the ESSER 2 funds as a reminder. But it's important to look at the next 2 to 3 years versus 1 year at a time when we're talking about looking at the ESSER funds and the reimbursement opportunities that we could take. As a reminder, the district's budget assumes all positions will be filled and that we spend all of our budgets, all the budgeted funds, the different departments and campuses. Once the district has a healthy fund balance, and we have options due to the federal funding available both in 2021 and 21-22. The district had a fund balance of almost 6.5 months of expenditures as of June 30th, 2020. First, we'll go over the general fund revenues in the budget. And they are budgeted by the local revenues, state revenues, and federal revenues. So for 2021, local revenues are $563.3 million, which consists mostly of property taxes. The state revenues are $414.4 million, which is comprised mostly of the state funding as well as TRS on behalf. And then federal funding of $20 million, which is comprised of the school health and related services reimbursement, as well as ROTC, and then any indirect costs that we can recover from our grants. And then other sources of $200,000 represents revenues from auctions. So you see that we are estimating total revenues of $997.8 million. The general fund expenditures for 21-22 consist of payroll, contracted services, supplies and materials, other operating, and capital outlay. And note that payroll costs comprise 89% of our expenditures. The proposed budget includes $12.8 million for accelerated instruction, and this amount is required to be separately budgeted in accordance with Texas Education Code 29.081. As mentioned previously, TEA has announced that districts cannot recode any of their costs until the ESSER grants we've received that notice of grant award. Therefore, the proposed budget that we're showing you today reflects a deficit of $65.7 million. But once again, the deficit assumes all positions will be filled, all budgeted funds will be spent, and conservative estimates for average daily attendance. The deficit will be reduced by moving allowable costs to the federal stimulus funding and will allow a raise for all employees. Districts are required to adopt their expenditure budget by fund and function. I will not go over each function, but rather highlight a few areas. The largest functional expense that the district has is for instruction, and it comprises 65% of our budget. The next largest function expense is plant maintenance and operation, which comprises almost 8% of our budget. Note, general administration comprises less than 2% of our annual expenditures. The payments to fiscal agents, SSA, is for our deaf co-op, if you're not familiar with what that would be, that the district serves as the fiscal agent. Other intergovernmental charges are fees that we pay to the Harris County Appraisal District, for a total proposed budget of $1,063,491,584. This chart is a visual of the functional areas and the percent these areas are of the budget. Note that instruction plus instructional support comprise 80% of the general fund expenditures. And then if we include the district operations, which supports instruction, for example, transportation, 96% of expenditures go towards instructional-related cost. The debt service fund budget that we will be going over now, as I said, we have to officially adopt a budget for the debt service fund and the food service fund. The debt service revenues consist of local revenues, which are tax collections to make the district's bond payments in the current year. Also, state revenues reflect the hold harmless the state provided when the state increased our homestead exemption from $15,000 to $25,000. And then federal revenues consist of the subsidy the district receives for its qualified school construction bonds. The expenditures are for current year bond payments, and the debt service budget reflects a balanced budget. Food service budget, as you well know, has been self-supporting, and we're very lucky that we have an operation that has been self-supporting. Food service local revenues consist of a la carte sales. The state revenues reflect a small state matching amount, and then the federal revenues is reimbursement for our free and reduced meals as well as commodities. The USDA and the Texas Department of Agriculture have announced that all students will eat free through the next school year if the district utilizes the seamless summer option, which we do. Expenditures reflect the cost to run the food service program and utilities for our kitchens, and we are hopeful that the food service program will not experience the revenue losses that we have incurred in 2019-20, because we actually had some losses associated with that, as well as 2020-21. And on a side note, the district will receive approximately $4.5 million to offset some of these lost revenues in 2021, and we're expecting to receive that funding sometime in July. This graph shows you a history of the district's property tax rates over the past 10 years. As you can see, the rate was fairly flat for the first 7 years on this slide, but note that the tax rate has not increased since the 2014 bond authorization. The tax rate decreased in 2019 and 2020 due to the maintenance and operations tax rate being compressed due to House Bill 3. I will review the 2021 estimated tax rate in more detail on the next slide. A major benefit to our taxpayers is that CFISD continues to offer a 20% optional homestead exemption. And just to give you an idea of what that means to our taxpayers, on a $250,000 home, this saved CFISD taxpayers approximately $678 in local property taxes in 2020-2021. The budget was built on a proposed maintenance and operations tax rate of 0.9256. This tax rate is comprised of our estimated compressed rate of 0.8756 plus 5 golden pennies. And just to refresh your memory, last year we added that additional 5th golden penny that we were allowed to add last year. And that's something that's also districts who have not taken that could have added this year also. As discussed earlier, districts will report their property values in late July, and then we will actually get that actual compressed rate in August. Therefore, the compressed rate may be slightly different than what you're seeing right here, but it'll be fairly close. The rate published in the public notice in the paper, in case you saw that, was a little bit higher because districts can adopt a tax rate that is lower than what they published, but not higher than what they published unless they have another public meeting and publish again. The interest in sinking rate will increase 1 cent this year to 41 cents. However, the total tax rate will be less than the current year's total tax rate. The total tax rate is estimated to be 1.3356 based on preliminary values and reflects a decrease of 0.0199 from the current total tax rate. So now I will be glad to respond to any questions that you may have over the presentation.
Thank you, Karen. Dr. Henry, I believe, has a statement.
Yeah, just one little statement, and I can be honest, I've been a superintendent 30 years and I've never made this statement, but we ordinarily, as a district, you have to look at a budget in a one-year window, but I think because of our recent experiences and what we're going to experience over the next 2 years, I think you almost have to look at our budget in a 3-year cycle. This year that we're coming out of, this coming year, and then the one after. And the reason I say that is because we still don't know what our ESSER 2 money is going to be. We're optimistic it's going to be better than that. Our ESSER 3 money, we not only are going to get the first round of it, but there'll be a second round coming later on, and we don't know what time frame that will be. So there's significant dollars out there that we're very, very confident that we're going to receive, but as Karen said, we don't know if we budget them in the 2021 school year or whether we do this next year. So I just hope the board can kind of take a 3-year mindset or approach. And what Karen said also, we're very nimble. Every year we hire about 1,000 people. So if we see that we're going to have an issue, we may have to cut back on our hiring next year. So there's a lot of factors in there. So I just wanted to include that because sometimes it looks pessimistic, but I'm really optimistic. I'm pleased with what the federal government has done, and I'm confident that the state is going to release that money to us. And I just know that we operate in such a way that whatever this board chooses to do, we can make happen. So I just want to throw that in there.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Henry. I know we're bound to have questions. Tom, I was seeing you down further, so I'm sure you've got one. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I'll start off with some simple things. First, a handful of years ago, I used my board monologue, not to tell jokes, because I don't tell good jokes, but to talk about the need for cybersecurity. A couple of months after that, we were one of the first districts, and perhaps the first district in the entire state of Texas, to hire a cybersecurity officer. So my question is, as cybersecurity threats continue to escalate and they continue to be more sophisticated, are we confident that we have allocated sufficient resources to address this? And do we have flexibility to add additional resources if need be? And you may not be prepared to answer that
I am.
tonight. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, sir. That's actually a great question. You know, it's something I think that's been on a lot of people's minds, just with recent situations that have occurred that you probably have heard in the news. We are very fortunate. One of the things that we need to do and what we do and what's best is we have what's called a layered approach. So that if, you know, maybe somebody gets through one area, you've got another layer that they have to get through. And Paula could probably explain that much better than myself. However, also, one of the things that has been really an issue, just so you know, associated with ransomware, is they get in and a district or a business or whatever might think, oh, I'm protected because I have a backup. Well, what they don't realize is that backup could be on the same server and it's not protected. So we actually we brought to the board probably a couple months ago, Air Gap, which helps with that, and it basically has it on a different server. Is that the correct way to say it? On a different server, you know, to help protect us. So we're constantly looking at. So I would say, and also the bond. The 2019 bond had quite a bit associated with cybersecurity in the bond just for that reason, because it's constantly changing.
And of course, it's all the more apt because, and I won't say names, but a large, sophisticated school district was hacked and held up to ransom. And I don't know if the bill was passed in the state legislature forbidding payment of ransomware by a school district. So I don't know if that passed.
Yeah,
I know
I don't
that
think
was,
so. I'm looking at my team, but they said no, and I'm not aware that it did either.
Good. I appreciate your comment, but I would like our CTO to address that question too, because CTO will look at it a little bit differently, perhaps, and perhaps not.
Would you like her to do that now, or she will be doing a presentation a little bit? Do you want her to do that now, or would you like to wait till that presentation?
It is completely up to y'all.
Let's wait. We'll just wait. Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, Paula, you're wearing out the carpet and going back and forth. Okay, Debbie, do you have something?
Well, can I keep
Oh,
going?
I'm sorry. Excuse me, Tom, I thought you were through.
No,
I don't know what I was thinking.
I was just taking a breath. Thank you for bringing out the 3%. I brought the 3% up at the last meeting. And even though, and I've been accused of not ever being explicit, y'all are now doing a very good job of understanding that which I never say, so thank you. A couple of points. First, let's talk about the inflation rate. I, too, follow the Fed fairly closely. And for the core inflation, estimated to be 3% this year, 2.1% next year, 2% the year after, the Fed chairman has called the inflation of this year to be transitory. And certainly the talking heads have opinions from one end to another. We do know that commodity prices, which ran up dramatically, are also falling, not quite as fast as they ran up, but falling just the same. Do you have any comments further on the question of inflation? I know the Fed chief has stated that really for the past decade, inflation has averaged 2%.
Actually, exactly, I was going to say is it's about 2% right now. I know that one of the things, that's kind of one of the marks, I guess you could say, the Fed uses is when it gets to 2%. However, what I've been reading from the information that I receive is that they think it might drop back down and kind of level off a little bit temporarily. Part of what has caused it is all of a sudden people are outspending, and that's what has caused some of the inflation. But they think it may level back off and then probably pick back up late 2022, beginning of 2023.
Next question. What would it cost to have an incentive bonus of, say, $500 in the fall, and to be bold, potentially another $500 incentive bonus in the spring?
A 500, like one-time retention stipend is
Correct.
cost 8.3 million. So it would be 8.3 million, and then if you took the two, of course, over the year, it would be $16.6 million.
You always give us a comparison of how we're doing versus neighboring school districts, which is important because we need to remain competitive from a hiring perspective. And I know other districts are always thrilled when they poach our employees. So where do we stand in that regard?
Well, one of the things, as you know, we said in the budget, it includes going from a starting teacher salary of $56,000 to $58,000. And that was there was only one district that's a competing district that was at that rate, but we anticipate that others would be at that rate, so we wanted to increase the starting teacher salary. But then most districts are looking at, Region 4 did a survey of 2 to 3% salary increase over the next year.
So the 3% would in fact be competitive.
Yes, sir.
The next question is not mine, it's my colleagues'. Debbie always asks this, but since I have the microphone first, I'll go ahead and trot it out. Give us an analysis of what, and you may not be able to do this at this meeting, but certainly you can at Thursday, what the raise would look like, and compare that to the cost of insurance for an employee, the increase. I always hear from somebody on my cul-de-sac about the comparison of salary and insurance, and I always like to have specific numbers whenever I talk to, say, perhaps my neighbor. And so, do you have those numbers available
Yes,
now?
I actually do. I was anticipating Debbie's question. So anyway, as was indicated, what TRS board shared is the increases were anywhere from 5.5% to 8% on premiums. So what the district typically looks at to see if our raises will help offset those costs, Mr. Jackson, is we actually look at what are most of our employees taking, which is a majority of our, well, first of all, just so you know, about 54.46% of our employees take our health insurance.
How many?
54, a little over 54% take our health insurance. And then 57% take the active care high deductible plan. And then 63% of our employees take employee only. So whenever we kind of look at, are we covering the cost associated with the increases in premiums, we always look at the high deductible plan for TRS Active Care. And that increase will be $32 a month, which is a total of $384 for the year. And so we look to make sure that our raises would more than offset the employee only of the high deductible plan for TRS Active Care.
I remember when I spoke to a group of admin in Roy's Academy, that a prominent member of that academy who has now gone to become superintendent of another school district whipped out a cell phone to show me an analysis from another school district showing salaries adjusted for insurance. But I'm also well aware that that you have to be very specific when you ask the questions because you get different answers. And so thank you for having the specific answers on that. It's important for us to know the hard dollars when we make a decision.
Well, and one thing, Mr. Jackson, just to add to that, if I may, is that, I shared with you how many of our employees, take our insurance, which is about a little over 54%. So we always have looked more towards salary increases so that we benefit those employees, that do not take our health insurance. So we've always tried to look at it in that manner.
And I have a hard question on insurance, but I'll come back to that. On some of the small items, I ask this question every year. So before I was on the board, I had to recommend leading a committee. The committee recommended, and I had to present to this board, proposed cuts. And one of the cuts that we recommended was the elimination of all stipends. And there's actually some people on this board who voted to approve the elimination of all stipends. And so I ask periodically, have we re-implemented all stipends? And when I talk to different groups, I receive different answers from them, and that's the reason why I asked the question again. Do we think we have reinstituted all stipends that were removed?
Yes, sir, I believe we have. And our staff compensation plan includes all of those stipends. I'm not aware of any stipends we haven't re-implemented, but Deborah I could get that from Deborah if there's been any stipends that haven't been added back. But there's a whole list of
and
stipends.
these would have been stipends removed before I ever was on the board. So
Okay.
we're talking 11 years ago, back when some of the board members had to come up with 20% budget cuts.
And in fact, we've actually increased some of the stipends, and comparing with local districts, we do comparison among local districts with some of our stipends, and stipends have been increased.
As I pointed out at the last board meeting, one of the buttons I've pushed for 10 years is increased resources for counseling. We went to a school board conference in San Antonio, and one of the themes that was pushed is the need for additional counseling services. Do all of our elementaries, are they funded with at least 2 counselors?
Yes, sir. In fact, the board approved in 2019, 2020, adding 29 counselors so that we would have at least 2 counselors at every elementary school.
So going forth, we should have 2 as long as they're available to be hired.
Yes.
Something that was significant for this district, but in chatting with teachers, admin from other districts, but also board members, this district was one of the first to devise the concept of a full-time sub. And we've had principals have come up with their own ability to create a full-time sub, just not on a district-wide basis. And it seems like this was a very effective item to be added to the toolbox. Do we have that as part of this budget?
That is not included in this existing budget, but if it's, the wishes of the board, it's definitely something we can definitely look at.
So I would ask 2 things. One, determine the cost of that. And I really see this as being on management side of the fence, how best to serve our children. But Mark, I would like, once Karen comes up with the numbers, for y'all to chat with us as to should we continue this idea or not.
And I believe, I will look and see if Amanda can, I don't see her over there. Wasn't it about 2.8 million? Okay, I think we'll verify for you, but I think it was about 2.8 million, but I'll verify for you.
So on top of the deficit we're looking at, and I'm just talking hypothetically, I'm not suggesting I would vote one way or the other, but what I've talked about, we could be adding another $16 to $20 million to the deficit, based on the numbers that you've given us. And some of this I suspect we can wait until we know if we have funding coming in. So is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Jackson. We know for sure what we're going to get with the ESSER 3 funds, but right now, we just don't know with the ESSER 2 funds how much we'll be getting. You know, what we were originally told was to plan for, you know, that the most school districts, and this was statewide, so not our district, was, you know, we might get 50% of it. But we've been conservative right now until we know, because once we need our final PEMS numbers, as I said, as well as to see what TEA says our final numbers are and what our offset will be. And once we know that, then it may free up additional funds from those ESSER 2 funds, which we are very hopeful of.
If we move ahead with some of the salary numbers we're talking about, will that constrain management's ability to be flexible to address learning deficiencies? And maybe deficiencies is not a good term, learning gaps, because I would anticipate that we may need to have additional resources directed to that, and I would not want to tie management's hands in being able to address that.
And I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to let Dr. Macias just share with you about the 20% that we have
She
budgeted.
is frowning, so I want to see what the frown's about.
I got this one. Mr. Jackson, we have looked at the 20% set aside for the ESSER 3 funds, and you heard Karen talk about the different stakeholders that we received input from. And basically what the money is going to be used for, and we've gotten input from our leaders as well, is 4 different areas. One is a staff member, but the staff member is either a class size reduction teacher who has at least 2 years of experience, so not a brand new teacher, but someone with at least 2 years of experience, and that the classes be between 15 to 17 students, and that is research-based. So that's where everything that's in the ESSER application has research backing it up. A second one is a core content area interventionist. So this would be an experienced teacher-level position that would work with students, so either in a pull-out or a push-in basis, but working with small groups of students throughout the day. And then a third one is a core content area specialist. So this would be, again, a teacher-level position who serves as a coach, as a resource for teachers to build capacity and help with those first-time instruction in the classroom. So those are the 3 positions under the staffing. The second component is extended time learning. So you heard Karen talk about that 20% talks a lot about that additional time. So the principals have submitted plans for before school tutoring, after school tutoring, welcome back camp before kids come back to school, as well as that closing the gap time that we've talked about, those 15 minutes that we added to the day, and they've pulled out another 15 minutes. That close the gap time also counts as extended time because we added time into the school day. So that all of that is built into the application. And then we also embedded professional development, but professional development that targets learning loss, how teachers can address and work with the learning loss. And then the final piece of it is a social emotional learning. And so there's components that the counseling staff has asked for different programs, but we've also asked our campuses to the plans about all that they're doing, what areas of social emotional learning does it target? Because social emotional learning should be not just standalone, but it should be every single day component that's embedded into the curriculum, into the instruction, and to the everyday. So those are the main components that are included in the ESSER 3 funding.
So y'all are comfortable that you have sufficient funds to fund your approach?
We have the funds to be able to fund these pieces that I shared with you. We also have other funds, as you know, Title I and Title III funds, as well as local and state funding that we're
Mr.
definitely
Jackson,
putting in.
Just in a general sense, not only what Linda's talked about, but once we see where our gaps are, we're going to spend the money necessary. So, and we have the money that we can address that.
Thank you. That, you know, Karen's predecessor always wanted to know, why did I never ask the questions that I meant to ask? But y'all have become wonderful at being able to answer those questions that I don't ask, so thank you. That is kind of what I was getting at. So here's the harder-edged insurance question. We always do a very fine job of covering employee costs, single employee cost of insurance increases. Talk to me, if you have the numbers, if not tonight, Thursday, about the cost of a family increase.
Yes, what I would like to do is, I do have that, but I don't have the percentages, so I'll bring that to you on Thursday.
Thank you. And with that, I will pass the microphone.
And Tom, if you don't mind, real quickly, I just got the information from Amanda. The amount that I was remembering was at a point in time earlier in the year, but it'll be about $4 million to $4.4 million for those permanent subs that we had on the campus for 2020-21.
And since you gave the microphone back to me, did that from a managerial perspective, and this may not be a question that you answer, but did that truly help from your perspective at filling the gaps and the voids for our absenteeism that occurred?
I'm going to let Deborah respond to that.
It absolutely did. Those permanent subs that the principals could count on being there day in and day out reduced greatly our need for subs. We can't imagine what would have happened without them.
You know, the anecdotal observations I've heard is that having that, and this is not just from this district, but obviously I spoke to people in San Antonio, but also elsewhere, is having the same person on campus day after day provided a consistency. Is that what y'all saw as well? I don't know who best to answer that question.
We did, and Sharita, I don't know if Onika's out there from the substitute office, but it definitely did provide some consistency with instruction. During COVID, we knew that those same people would be on the campus. Principals could count on them being there, so consistency was definitely one of the advantages.
And that would be about 4 million more, is that what you said, Karen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good.
If we did the same number,
Right.
you know, that we did this year.
Excellent, thank you.
Ms. Blackshear.
And Tom, I appreciate you always helping me out there. Question. Since we don't know when we'll be receiving those ESSER 2 and 3 funds, once we know the dollar amount, it would be possible for us then to come back and amend the budget, correct?
Absolutely, Debbie.
And in the survey we sent out, it says retention of staff, i.e. one-time stipend. Would it be possible at that time, say it's October, to give all staff an additional 1% increase going forward? And if so, what that dollar amount would be? And is that something that we could use ESSER funds for, or does it have to be a stipend?
Well, as far as the ESSER funds are concerned, it has to be we can't do raises for all employees.
Okay, it would have to be a stipend.
It would have to be a
Okay.
stipend. We're
Okay.
allowed to do something where we, like Dr. Macias was sharing with
Right.
you, where we might hire a position.
Right.
But we could not do across-the-board raises
Okay.
from the ESSER funds.
Okay, that answers that question. Then, is it possible to, you know, we always do a survey of where we stand with the surrounding school districts on starting pay and midpoint and all of that. Would it be possible to also do a survey with those districts of what their employee benefit expense is and the amount of their increase? And I realize in my, because in my former lifetime, I was a CEO. And the cost of insurance for years now has been steadily increasing, and it's really out of the employer's control. Because I can remember the day when my insurance was covered 100% by my employer, and I was able to continue that. And then the day and time came where it began increasing so that I was not able to pay all of that, but had to start passing along to employees the cost. And that was not a happy day in my experience then as an employer, and it's not a happy day for us as trustees and as administration to be in that position that we really don't have a choice. And we've looked at, I believe, we're part of TRS Care.
TRS Active Care.
Active Care. And we've looked at that before, and it's just about impossible to get out of that. Am I correct?
There was actually new legislation passed in the 87th legislative session, and that is actually something that we're going to look at, forming some type of insurance committee and getting input on that. And basically, if you opt out for a period of, opt out, you have to do it by a certain time, and you have to stay out for a period of time. You can't come back in.
Okay.
And then, so we would, look at that.
We could
and
look
see.
at that to see if that was even a
possibility.
We are planning doing RFQ,
Yes.
RFP this
Okay,
next year.
Okay, good.
Once we get a committee in place, because the law it probably
Just
doesn't go into
changed.
effect till September 1st.
It doesn't till September
Okay,
1st.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad to hear the legislature has finally stepped in and helped us with that.
And we want
Yeah.
some of the input from employees. Another thing that affected it was these school districts that are District of Innovation that did these additional
Right.
plans, and it caused the cost to go up. The legislative session has changed that. For next school year, they can stay in and have two plans, but after that, you cannot have a competing plan, even if you're a District of Innovation.
Okay.
So they're trying to kind of maybe help
Help
reduce those
reduce
costs.
costs? Okay.
The one thing I would add to this, though, and any employees that might be listening, we don't know that we can get a better plan.
Well,
I know
that's-
our
I know
plan might
that's
not be
true.
great, but
There aren't any great plans
there's not any
out
great
there.
plans anymore.
I understand
But
that.
we do have the opportunity to look.
Good. That's what I'm happy about, that we have the opportunity to look so that, we can demonstrate to our employees that we are looking to see if it is possible to lower their benefit cost.
And we will include some of them on that committee to assist us in what
Okay.
their main concerns are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm going to add to that just a little bit because I remember being on the board when we went with TRS. The reason we went with TRS is because we were self-funded prior to that, and because of the debt that had thrown us into was so insurmountable that we had to make a decision to go with TRS in the first place. So it was really hurting the district, and it was keeping us from doing the things that we're the most proud to do.
I can tell you, Bob, too, I was here a year after y'all ended the self-funded plan. My first year here, we had a $13 million overrun we were still paying. So.
Right. No, Mr. Ryan, I said Dr. Ryan. Wow.
I don't blame you.
No, no, no.
I don't blame you. Yeah. Didn't I, though? Hey, Karen, instead of, and I think collectively and individually as a board, we all realize the stress and all the extra things we had, all of our employees that went through this year. Instead of a stipend, what would it look like at a 5% increase?
Basically, then, you just would have to add another 8.3 million for every percent that we would go up. So it would be about 40 million for us to do a 5% increase.
As opposed to 24.
Is towards 24.
And then, to follow up on what Mark was saying earlier, if we're going at a 3-year window, is that doable within that 3-year window? And sustainable, yeah.
The 5%.
Sustainable's a better word.
I would say, first of all, I guess the things that we would need to consider in making that decision is, hopefully, we don't know the ESSER 2 amount at this point in time, so we don't know how much we can offset with that. But I will say it would go into fund balance quite a bit more. And one of the things that to consider when you're looking at that as the board is raises are ongoing, so it's every year. Also, a June 30 school district needs a little more in fund balance than a district that has an August 31 because we have to wait 2 additional months before our tax receipts start coming in. And then just looking at the fact that our fund balance, not saying that we have to keep the fund balance that we have now by any means what I'm saying, but it's afforded us the ability to respond to things like the hurricane, the pandemic, the winter storms, and we've incurred those costs, and it hasn't really caused us a major issue because we had money to offset those costs. The large drawdowns we had to do because of the pandemic. And I think the only other thing that I would like to share is that also our bond rating agencies, they always look at when you have huge drawdowns of fund balance, it could affect our bond rating. And if that changes, then it costs us more money to borrow towards those bonds. So those are just things to take into consideration when we're looking at it.
And I would go back to say, yes, salaries are ongoing. There's no doubt about that. But we are nimble. We have the ability to adjust. We have the ability, if we see we're in trouble, that there may not be a raise for anyone next year. I think you're coming off a very difficult year for whatever you can do for employees would be appreciated.
Yes.
Well, and just because when we heard from not just the speakers tonight, but throughout this timeframe, is that they've put in more and been paid less for what they've put in. And so if we are able to do over 3%, I would love for us to consider it, I can tell you that, in lieu of a stipend. I think a pay increase would be more well-received than just a stipend.
Right. I would agree with that.
Not to belittle the stipend issue, but I just think the pay increase.
Absolutely, because that's ongoing and it's TRS eligible.
Just one more little thing to throw in there, and Tom and I had this discussion this weekend, or past week at SLI, is the legislature is going to be looking at our fund balances. They already wanted to recoup it with legislation this year, so if after this pandemic we add significantly to our fund balance, that's not going to look good. I know that sounds terrible, but that's true.
Okay, that was just it. I'd like to consider higher than 3%.
Okay.
Personally.
Dr. Ogletree.
Well, to follow along that line of thought, if we do a raise, a significant raise like that, then our fund balance, am I hearing you correctly, Cameron, will be reduced? Is that right?
Yes, because it's ongoing. However, as Dr. Henry said, we're hoping with the ESSER funding, things will work out. Another thing is to consider that I shared with you that you always have to take into consideration is we do have to budget to fill all positions. And we don't always fill all those positions. There's also the fact that everybody doesn't always spend all of their budget. That amount varies from year to year, though. But we do have some things that I think could help us out, I guess you could say, to help assist with that.
Well, I think, looking at this year, that we have to do more than the 3%. We've done that with no pandemic. And so with what our employees have gone through, we need to have every option on the board for that. Now, getting back to the ESSER funds, you are assured, or are you, that we will get the $189.2 million? There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Yes,
it's just a matter of when.
On the ESSER 3 funds, we feel very confident about that because those are the funds, I don't know if you recall, that the legislature or state tried to actually keep that money and supplant or force us to save back 40% of it. And the federal government came back and said, no, you've got to give it to school districts. So we do feel that we will be getting that money. The part that's still in question of how much we will get is the ESSER 2 funds.
Okay. And as far as the ESSER 2, you believe possibly 30%?
Yes, I feel fairly confident on that 30% of that $84 million.
Would you, I think I asked you, you gave the amount on a $500 stipend. What would be, do you still have that figure on the
Yes, I do.
$750
Yes,
or
I do.
$1,000?
The 500 one-time retention stipend would be $8.3 million. 750 one-time retention stipend would be $12,450,000. And then a 1,000 stipend would be $16,600. I'm sorry, $16,600,000. I wish it was just 16,000. Then we could do a lot.
Okay. Now, Dr. Henry, when you mentioned that we should look at a budget in a 3-year sense, you were not talking about the stipends that we may consider. Were you?
I really was talking about if the board feels like they need to go a little more than we recommended. I'm saying that we'll look at this as a 3-year look. Because any 1 year might look bad, but then the next year might look great. It's just when we get the ESSER money.
Karen, what, I think you indicated as of June of 2020, we had 6.5 months.
Yes, at 2020, but what you have to take into consideration is our expenditures that incurred in 2020, 21, and then what we'll be having next year.
So could you give us, considering our bond rating, what would you estimate the lowest we could go if we wanted to touch this fund balance to make sure that we keep and maintain employees before it would affect our rating?
That is, I will have to ask, let me check into that, Dr. Ogletree. One of the things they typically ask in our bond rating calls are large drawdowns of fund balance. Is the question I'm usually asked, do you anticipate any large drawdowns? And so, but I would have to see on that. But then again, remember, some of the ESSER money could offset it, so we might not realize that huge drawdown. So that's just something I would feel better just running by our financial advisor. I'm coming back to you with that. exact amount, he would say that he might trigger a concern, but like I said, that would be offset by some of that ESSER money. So it, might not create the situation of a concern.
Okay, and what is the fund balance now?
Our fund balance right now is 507, this is as of June 30th, 2020. So it was 517,854,311. And so we would, just have to look at, like I said, when we draw down that money, I think at the end of this year, it may be a little different at the end of 2020-21, because as I shared, we can't offset any of those costs if we don't get that notice of grant award before June 30th. But it'll catch up the next year and we'll be fine. So
That's when I'm talking about the 3-year.
looking at the 3-year look.
They're going to hopefully submit the no-go tomorrow.
We hope to, yes, we plan to submit it tomorrow.
They send it, and I'm calling the commissioner to say, okay, you promised to move us up to the front, so we may be able to offset a bunch of our, by, I don't know about Thursday, probably not, but 2021 deficit we're showing, most of that might be gone. Does that make sense? Just when the money gets here.
All right.
Ms. Hanneman?
Thank you for the thorough presentation, Karen. We've been focusing a lot on the expenditure side and the parts that we can control. Looking at the page that talks about general fund revenues and the sources of revenue, 56% of our revenue comes from mostly property tax collection, correct?
That's correct.
And until the previous state legislative session, we could control our own tax rate, correct? But now we don't because, right, after House Bill 3?
Well, not really in the sense that we were capped. If we were at $1.04, we
Right.
were capped at that and we couldn't go any
Okay,
higher.
got you, okay. But
Without a TRE.
right, without asking.
Yes.
Yes, right, but now we wait till the TEA tells us what our property tax rate will be in
Correct.
August.
But when they compress the tax rate, Julie, what they do is they offset it in state aid.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that makes me feel better. The 20% optional homestead exemption, what is the value of that?
The value, I actually have that here.
I know you talked about to an individual taxpayer, it may be $678 a year, but overall.
For the school district, the 20% optional homestead exemption, I guess you could say our lost levy.
Correct.
And this, just so you know, this includes the maintenance and operations side and the interest and
yes,
sinking
right.
side.
Okay.
Is $88.5 million. So we basically, I guess you could say lose $88.5 million with the optional homestead exemption that, benefits our taxpayers. And then also we have the Freeport exemption, which is another $31.3 million.
Julie, you might have said this, but that's not optional anymore. The optional homestead exemption we cannot remove.
I thought that it was
It
expiring.
was changed
I
in
think it
the
expired, yeah.
86 legislative
Correct.
My
session.
bad.
Yes.
Yep.
Good. I mean, we're not
I'm not suggesting that.
recommending that.
I am
Yes.
not, I understand that. I understand that. However, if we are looking at providing a raise that we can sustain long-term, I mean, we need to understand what our sources of revenues are. And sometimes we have to make hard decisions. If we're going to pay our employees what we want to pay them. So, if we don't have revenue from the state or from other sources, I'm just putting it out there.
You are making a great point that we're kind of on fixed income.
Correct. But we want to budget more and more and more, and our deficit goes higher and higher and higher. We need to look at all of our sources of revenue. So, that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Sarabia?
Yes, being the youngster here, absolutely great questions, and I'm just learning tons right now and stuff. Great questions by everybody. Can the ESSER money go into the fund balance?
The ans- the answer really is what we can do with that, but then you're supplanting, I guess you could say, or you're not getting any new money. We cannot just put it in fund balance and not spend it. It has to be drawn down by those dates that we shared, which would be September 30th, 2023, and September 30th, 2024. So we have to actually draw it down for a specific purpose. It can't just go into fund balance. However, if the district said, okay, I'm just going to offset expenses and help save money and create more fund balance, which is what the legislature was trying to get us to do with that 40%. But then basically all it's doing is supplanting and it's no new money.
Right, okay. And also, I do love the conversation of possibly giving up to 5%. I'm extremely pleased with all the conversation and the questions going on, pending up to a more substance on the raise. And a great report, Karen. Thank you for having many, many, many answers. So thank you.
Mr. Jackson has a follow-up question.
So what is your best guess of, in terms of months, what our reserve balance is currently or is projected to be as of June 30?
Well, as of June 30th,
Of this year?
Assuming that we realize the deficit that we are showing the board through the final amended budget of $53 million, it would get us to 5.24 months in fund balance.
I find 5.24 months still very livable. The exact comment that I gave to Mark in San Antonio is I would prefer to give some of our fund balance to our employees as opposed to letting the state tell us what we needed to do with it. Don, I would say that I have 4% easy. Or another way of saying it is, you had me at 4%. So I definitely, well, I like 4% and a stipend. There's not a lot of difference. But I definitely like 4 and a stipend. I would say that 5.
It would depend on the amount of the stipend.
Yeah. Well, the size I was talking about, because the size I was talking about was roughly a 1% raise, doing it 2 times. So you and I were in the same ballpark. We were just talking about different names for the amount. For the 5, we would have to do it, I would have to do it with the perspective that perhaps next year the raise might, based on how the numbers come in, a proposed raise may not be as much as we would like to give, and certainly might not follow. But I have only 1 vote, and we have a lot of votes on the dais.
The only reason I was more in line with the 5% versus the stipend was that carries over with TRS and has a bigger impact, I think, if we have those that are reaching retirement, things like, then that's a
Well, I thought Karen told us the stipend figures into TRS.
No, it does not.
It does not?
No.
Okay. So the bottom line is, you and I were talking the identical dollars.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of tomato or tomato, and I certainly like your reasoning, but it's nice to know you and I have finally agreed on something, right?
We agree.
So you said we're at roughly 5.2, and I find that very comfortable. By giving the additional, if we were to give the additional amounts, either in stipend or in a raise, because it's the same dollar amount, what would that push the balance down to in terms of months?
Are you talking, let's say, over a period of time of,
No,
just,
well, actually, that's a good way of looking at it, over a 3-year period of time, because the stipend's a one-year event, but if we look at 3 years.
and kind of what I did, Mr. Jackson, is I kind of looked at it 2 different ways. I looked at worst-case scenario and best-case scenario. And the worst case is that we just get the ESSER 3 money and we get very little of the ESSER 2 money. And it's, assuming something doesn't happen that I'm not expecting, such as
You mean like a freeze or a
hurricane
pandemic or a
something
hurricane?
like that.
Yeah, we never have those, never.
If we got down to, if we did 5%, let's see, I have here that it would be after 3 years, assuming what also happens in 2020, 21, we would get down to about 4 months in fund balance, kind of with the worst case scenario. The best case scenario, it would be closer to 4.25%.
So
4.25 months.
So although 6 is the gold standard, 3 is absolute minimum, I would consider 4 to be acceptable, that 1 month of cushion, because 3 months is the absolute minimum. So a 1 month cushion, I would say, for my 1 vote, I would be comfortable with that concept. I'd love 6 months, right? But I can definitely live with 1 month. Thank you, and Bob, thank you for letting me have the microphone.
Sure. Karen, awesome report. Thank you very much. And I think you probably heard from the board and you know what our feelings are. And I feel sure you're going to go back and probably, whip up on our superintendent and see what y'all can come up with. I think that's a great presentation. I know that we're all in favor of supporting our teachers. We know what they've done this year, and we did what we could during this year, not knowing what was in front of us. We always feel like that our teachers and our administrators are the they're the working machinery that makes this district move forward. And I've seen this district make really hard decisions, and those hard decisions have sustained us, and we have continually been very financially soluble, and I think that's great. And I'll also say, just serving on the TASB board, there's a whole lot of districts within this Region 4 that wait till they see what we gonna do in the next 3 days before they set theirs. And so I've heard that from a lot that will say, y'all, don't get real excited here. Y'all don't push forward too far. We may not be able to afford it out. So that's kind of, they look at Cy-Fair as kind of the pinnacle of what we do. And if I remember correctly, when we looked at the salaries, we weren't in first place on starting salary, but we were in second place. And then as you went along over 6 or 10 years, we were in first place on our salary level within the region. Is that correct?
Yes, once you get to those higher years, yes, sir.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Covey, to that point, on Thursday before the meeting, we will bring you the different scenarios we talked about and what starting pay would be for teachers, and then like at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, so y'all can have a picture of that.
Okay.
Did you hear that, Karen?
Yes.
And I'm also going to state, and I have been to a number of SLI and conferences, not all districts have a board that keep children as the foremost and the most important thing in our focus. And that's what we do, and that's what we also feel about teachers. We will now proceed to the public hearing portion of the agenda. The board will hold a public hearing on the adoption of the 2021-2022 budget Monday, and it is way past 6 p.m., June the 21st, 2021. I don't know that we need to discuss anything further. Karen, do you have anything to present here?
No, it would only be if there were any public comment, people that signed up.
I don't have anybody signed up that I see. Okay? Okay. I'm sorry, what? Okay. 8B, the board will hold a public hearing on the Children's Internet Protection Act, CIPA, for internet filtering and internet safety at, well, it won't be, it'll be at, what time is it, 7:45? Okay, can't do it before 6. June 21st, 2021. Karen, you're up again. Dr. Linda Macias, Paula Ross, and Karen Fuller. We have lots of microphones, ladies.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Paula.
President Covey, members of the board, and Dr. Henry, Technology Services would like to share with you the measures that our district is taking in support of the Children's Internet Protection Act. The Children's Internet Protection Act, otherwise referred to as CIPA, was enacted by Congress in 2000 to address concerns about children's access to obscene or harmful content over the internet. CIPA imposes certain requirements on school districts that receive discounts for internet access or internal connections through the Federal Communications Commission's FCC E-rate program. The goal of the FCC's E-rate program is to help make telecommunication services, and internet access more affordable for school districts. This evening's public hearing was advertised in the Houston Chronicle with the purpose of validating how Cypress-Fairbanks complies with the Children's Internet Protection Act. The hearing will focus on the following 4 areas: protective measures, compliance and policies, education, and governance. Karen Fuller and her team are responsible for the majority of our network protective measures. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Karen to share the protective measures that we have chosen to highlight this evening.
The first protective measure highlighted is regarding our internet service providers. To begin this presentation, I would like to briefly highlight a few of the network upgrades that have been accomplished as a result of our recent bond initiatives. These upgrades provide our district with resources necessary to be able to enhance our internet filtering and provide greater protection for our student population. Prior to 2014, our network maintained a single connection to one internet service provider. Over the course of the past few years, Cypress-Fairbanks has been able to expand to 2 active data centers, each with their own internet service provider. We continue to maintain and upgrade the 2 data centers and expand our connections to the 2 internet service providers. Our team closely monitors our internet bandwidth. By definition, bandwidth is the volume of information that can be sent over a connection in a measured amount of time. To date, our internet bandwidth is 100 times the size it was in 2014. The ongoing proliferation of an innovative digital learning technologies has led to a steady rise in the demand of internet bandwidth. Technology Services has a variety of tools that aid in monitoring our internet bandwidth. Tools that display the source of traffic, both inbound and outbound, and tools that provide the ability to manage denial of service attacks. These particular graphs and a snapshot of our internet traffic for each of our internet service providers. As we begin the 2020-2021 school year, we were concerned as to whether our district had sufficient internet bandwidth to support our new cloud-based learning management systems, Schoology, our new LTE one-to-one program, and the increased use of video conferencing with Zoom. The team was able to use this type of tool set to distribute traffic so that we could better manage our overall internet usage. On the left side, you'll notice inbound traffic to our network, and on the right side, you'll see outbound traffic as it leaves our network. Having this type of visibility is beneficial for a variety of reasons. For example, while monitoring our internet traffic, we became curious as to why a significant amount of Oracle traffic appeared on both our inbound and outbound traffic. We soon learned that due to the increased use of Zoom during the pandemic, Zoom selected and converted to an Oracle cloud structure. Zoom needed enhanced scalability to be able to address the increased demand for Zoom services. As a result, the Oracle traffic represents our Zoom users. The next protective measure pertains to our network firewalls. Technology Services has a total of 10 next-generation zero-trust firewalls protecting our network. These firewalls are configured with profiles that offer superior protection against antivirus, anti-spyware, internet filtering, file blocking, and vulnerability protection. This graph represents the categorization of attacks against our users that were blocked by our firewalls, with the highest volume being spyware. CFISD benefits from our firewall research team capturing global network traffic from firewalls around the world and then analyzing the data to examine the latest network attack trends. As a firewall customer, we are protected by network attacks by updating our firewalls with the latest threat prevention signature releases. This pictorial represents the top 100 attacks against our network by geographically sourced data from around the world. The last protective measure mentioned in this presentation is our internet content filtering. In preparation for supporting both face-to-face and remote learning during the 2020-21 school year, Technology Services piloted and selected a new internet filtering solution called Content Keeper. Installing a filtering solution separate from our firewall offered greater internet filtering options that ensured the safety of students across every device, browser, and platform. In addition, with the implementation of our new CFISD LTE program, this filtering solution allowed us to provide students with the same internet experience, regardless of whether they chose to be on campus or learning remotely. If a student and/or staff member attempts to visit a site that is restricted, the user would receive this blocked message from Content Keeper. Depicted here is a dashboard of statistics for the month of April 2021. During the month of April, we logged the following activity: 10 billion, 70 million, and 38,000 internet websites were visited. 3,600,140 internet sites were blocked, and 42,400 behavioral alerts were logged. One feature of this product that is worth highlighting is the behavioral alerts. If the word kill is entered in a search engine, Content Keeper will provide the contextual search parameters entered by the user. For example, if the user were searching to kill a mockingbird versus searching how to kill a character in a video game.
The second area of focus is compliance and policies. Included in the Cypress-Fairbanks Student Handbook, Student Code of Conduct, and Employee Handbook are strict policies pertaining to electronic communication and data management, network and internet responsible use guidelines, computer software policies. In addition to the handbooks, our cybersecurity mission statement is to help students and staff succeed in their tasks in a secure manner and to protect our CFISD community from cybercrime. In support of this mission, the cybersecurity team has implemented several initiatives to ensure that our district is adhering to best practices in 5 practice areas: business, leadership, data security, professional development, and classroom practice. The third area of focus is education. Teaching our students how to use the internet resources safely and appropriately has always been important in Cypress-Fairbanks ISD. Our students develop skills and knowledge to effectively use the internet and other digital technology. Currently, lessons are taught throughout the year within various curriculum areas that address digital citizenship, cyberbullying, and internet safety. In addition, librarians teach students lessons on internet safety, digital citizenship, and proper research skills. With our one-to-one LTE Chromebook initiative, we'll reevaluate our educational components and look for opportunities for expanding digital citizenship within our current curriculum. The fourth and final area of focus is governance. Cypress-Fairbanks ISD is honored to have received the Trusted Learning Seal. We have worked diligently with district leadership, staff, and students to ensure that appropriate measures are in place to secure information. The district understands that earning this distinction is not the end of the process, but only the beginning. We will continue to implement and improve security measures regularly in order to deliver a trusted learning environment for our community. The Trusted Learning Seal is a mark of distinction for school systems, signaling that they have taken strong and measurable steps to ensure the privacy of student data. Cypress-Fairbanks originally earned the distinction in 2019 and successfully renewed the seal in 2021. CFISD will continue to improve on the 5 highlighted practice areas and will apply again for renewal in 2023. One item worth noting is that we are one of 17 school districts across the nation that have earned this TLE seal. At this time, we'll entertain any questions that you might have.
Ms. Sarabia, do you have any questions?
Excellent report. No questions?
Ms. Heineman? Mr. Ogletree? Doctor?
None.
Sorry,
Great
Mr.
report.
Ryan. Dr. Ogletree? None? Mr. Ryan? No. Debbie Blackshear? No. Mr. Jackson?
And thank you for letting me catch my breath. I appreciate it, sir. So first question, refresh my memory, how many cyber attacks did we have during the past year?
During the past year, we were discussing that earlier today, we could have anywhere from a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand per day.
And what would have been the highest peak volume?
We had attack the 21st of this month. Do you remember what that was?
We get, as far as numbers, we get DDoS hits on a daily basis. And it just, if you look at a DDoS attack, you're really measuring bandwidth that it takes when you do a DDoS attack. And our service is such that the size is something very tolerable for us. So typically a DDoS attack is about once a day. We may get 2 or 3 of those a week. They're really high during testing.
Karen, will you share what a DDoS attack is?
So a DDoS attack is when someone from the outside knows some IP addresses, or they know our IP address is kind of like your phone number. You know, years ago when you had a home phone and people just keep calling you and not hanging up, that's what a DDoS attack is. It's your phone doesn't stop ringing and nobody can call you while your phone's ringing. So that's what a DDoS attack does to our network. It just keeps everybody else from getting connected to our network, and it causes traffic not to be able to exit our network.
It's considered a denial of service. The intent is to flood the ports so that service will come to a halt.
And that's really a good way to encapsulate it when you said a denial of service. Years and years ago, we actually had a very clever student who was able to penetrate our system. And what you're saying is, even though we still have very clever students, they just aren't as successful now, and they have not been successful, period, correct?
That is correct.
That's correct.
Let me repeat the question I had during the budget time period. Cyber attacks will continue to increase in complexity, particularly since they have penetrated a very sizable school district and received ransom money. So we know they will be emboldened to try elsewhere. We know technology has to be fed, and technology is always hungry. Do we have sufficient resources to continue to feed our cybersecurity measures?
Let me share with you some of our approach that we have taken. Although tonight's presentation was focused on SIPA, we have been working off a cybersecurity plan that we created in 2019. With Bond 2019, all of our upgrades have been conducted with a security focus. For example, later tonight, we're seeking the board's approval for ClearPass. ClearPass is an authenticated approach to our wireless network, and it will keep you have to have the credentials to be able to authenticate to our network. One thing that we've done, even though I've said we worked off a plan created in 2019, our cybersecurity team has created a 5-year plan. and it's our goal to share that plan with the board this fall. These plans are created, as Karen mentioned, off a multi-tiered approach. We've done a crosswalk between different frameworks. For example, the NIST framework is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and the CIS framework is the, let's see, what's CIS stand for? Center for Internet Security. So many of our approach is based upon a crosswalk of the different frameworks. For example, and this approach is a layered approach, as Karen mentioned earlier, but it's also referred to as a defense in depth. It's built with the understanding that there's no single product that can stop all cyber attacks. You need this layered approach. Organizations that apply the first 5 CIS controls, for example, reduce their risk of cyber attack by as much as 85%. Implementing these type of controls, the risk reduction is reduced to around 94%. There are several, as I mentioned with Bond 2019, several initiatives that we put in place that also have a cybersecurity focus. For example, we have the state mandated know before training. With that, we have phishing emails. That's probably your biggest threat vector for ransomware or malicious attacks coming in. Within our O365, we have a phish alert notification. If you have an email that comes in that looks suspicious, you can report it immediately to cybersecurity. We have a product called Extra Hop. Extra Hop monitors our east-west traffic within our network. As Karen mentioned, we have upgraded our firewalls. With our email system, which is Microsoft O365, we've implemented a Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection, and it also stops some of these malicious emails from coming in. We have SSL encryption and decryption, both at the firewall and at the content filtering level. And what this does is this breaks down the packet that comes in, because oftentimes there's malicious content that is hidden or embedded inside the packets. Karen mentioned DDoS monitoring. We have multi-factor authentication that we're rolling out at different levels. With our student portal, which is known as ClassLink, my.cfisd.net, we have multi-factor authentication that we just rolled out there.
Thank you for an excellent and thorough answer. But more than the answer, thank you for doing the work, right? We need the protection, we need your talent. So thank you.
Thank you.
Paula, before you sit down, and this is not going to be about SIPA, and I really appreciate that, but over this past year when we have done as much work as we have virtually, I know broadband is a big subject out there, and I know there's rural communities that have a problem with their broadbands. But there's also locations within Cy-Fair District that don't have broadband connection. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
And so what are we doing to try to help with that?
With our one-to-one LTE program, those were the students that were given hotspots.
Okay.
For
All right.
internet connectivity.
I thought there was something. I'd had that question posed to me, and I appreciate you answering it.
Absolutely.
Thank y'all both for the report.
Thank you.
The board will now review the following consensus action item. 9A, the board will consider approving the minutes of the May 10th, 2021 regular board meeting. Are there any questions or concerns about this? Hearing none, the board will now review the following non-consent action items. 10A, the board consider approving constructions, proposal, and contracts paid from bond funds to the recommended contractor and authorize the superintendent or designee to execute all necessary documents related to such contract as follows. Are there any questions for Mr. Morgan? Hi, Mr. Morgan. Good to see you here.
And Mr. President, if you don't mind, if Matt would come up, or maybe Roy wants to, just introduce our guest from PBK here. And I want them to know that I moved y'all up first on the agenda after the reports and hearings today, just so y'all are aware of that.
Dr. Andy, I'd like to introduce Brandon Ross, who's partner with PBK, and Sarah Stoling. She is the project executive, I believe, on the project.
Where'd she go to high school, Roy?
I don't know, Cypress Creek. And Texas A&M. I did get that correct, Sarah, right?
Another whoop, right? 10B, the board consider approving board members to serve as delegate or alternate delegate to the 2021 Texas Association of School Boards. very brief discussion tonight because of my position on the TASB board, and we represent the large district. We do have a position from one more person to serve as a delegate to the Assembly in September. Last year it was Ms. Blackshear. Do I have any suggestion? Was it? No, it was you. I remember sitting with you, Deb.
That was 2 years ago, we did.
Oh, it was, yeah, pandemic, okay.
And we're going to be in Dallas, is that correct?
It's in Dallas, yes.
I'll be glad to serve if no one is.
Thank you, Dr. O. Dr. Ogletree's willing to serve. Do I have, well, no, we will do that later. Okay, we're not going to do that tonight. Okay, so if anybody wants to arm wrestle Dr. Ogletree for that position, we'll see that later tonight. 10C, the board will consider can I move that to, we better make that stand alone. Is that okay if that stands alone? Thank you, Holly. 10C, the board will consider the endorsement of candidacy of TASB Board of Directors representing Region 4. At this time, our candidate is Georgianne Rittmeyer for position 4A from Klein ISD. I would recommend that y'all please support her in this. Georgianne is an amazing trustee and just somebody that we all care a lot about. So we will vote on that on Monday night. I'd like that to stand alone too, Holly. Yo.
Bob, we've got, on our deal, it says position A is Georgianne and position C is Tony Hopkins. We voting for
I don't see
both of
position
those?
C. It's not on my agenda.
So we're voting for 2, right?
Yeah, and we can because they're different positions. So position 4A and 4C. And Tony Hopkins, I didn't see this on mine, so I'm sorry.
It's just not on the script.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the only 2 that we have, right? Okay. All right, so we'll move that to Thursday night. 10D, the board will consider approving the budget amendments for the period of April 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2021. Do we have any questions for Karen? I think we're questioned out, Karen. And we move that to consent? Thank you. Move it to consent. I'm sorry.
In the past, we've left that separate just because of the dollar amount on something that big, and I would suggest that we leave that separate.
That's the
Yeah.
elementary.
It's
Okay.
the elementary school.
Leave that separate. Thank you for the historical stuff, Don. Thank you.
I'm big on history.
I know. Where am I? Okay. 10E, the board will consider approving the resolution for the commitment of the district's fund balance. Anybody have any questions for Karen Smith on that tonight?
I do.
Yes, sir.
So briefly summarize what the commitment is for, and also explain what does it mean for us to commit a fund balance?
Basically, there's several portions of fund balance, just so you know. For example, fund balance that's non-spendable, which is like our inventory. Fund balance that's restricted, of which we don't have any of that in the general fund, but for example, our fund balance in the debt service fund is restricted because it's just for the use of paying debt. And then the next is committed, and it's where the board, it requires board approval, and in order to remove it, it also requires board approval. So typically, the types of things that we would do is, for example, our campus activity funds, we say that we're going to not pull it into the general fund and let them utilize those funds as intended, as they wanted to use those. Also, it's to, I guess you could say, set aside money for any areas where maybe we are self-funded, and we need to make sure we have fund balance to take care of that in case something occurs maybe out of the ordinary. For example, we're self-funded with unemployment, workers' compensation. Also, we're partially, I guess you could say, self-funded with some of our auto and our buses, as well as our stop loss. So we have very areas where we would want to save fund balance since we're self-funded. Well, basically, right now, we don't have in there, that'll be in the actual financial statements once we see where we are at year end.
Can we move that to consent? Is everybody okay with that, or you want it to stand alone? Consent? All right, move it to consent. 10F, the board consider the adoption of the 2021, wait a minute. Oh, that was right. 2021-2022 budget. Stand alone? Okay, stand alone, please. 10G, the board will consider approving the list of qualified financial institutions, brokers, dealers, investment pools, and investment advisors that are authorized to engage in investment transaction with the district. You may have any questions for Ms. Smith again.
I do have a question for Marnie. Do I need to sign one of those forms again? Thank you. So Bob, do you want me to make that declaration tonight or
That'd be
Thursday?
We can do it Thursday.
Very
That's
good.
fine. Okay, anybody else any questions?
I have a
You want us to
question.
have that stand alone?
No, I have a
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry, John.
Karen, this list, is it identical to the list we approved on last year, or has there been any withdrawals of broker dealers, financial institutions, investment pools, investment advisor, or have any new ones been added?
This is the same as last year, Dr. Ogletree.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay?
And Bob, on that point, Debbie reminded me that that needs to be standalone.
Right.
Thank you.
I figured since you're, stand alone on that one, Holly. 10H, the board will consider a resolution approving the district's investment policy and investment strategy, the investment officers of the district, the independent sources of instruction relating to investment responsibilities for the investment officers of the district, and the investment training hours. Any questions for Karen on this? We need this to stand alone, board? Nope, move to consent. 10I, the board will consider approving the 2021-2022 Harris County Protective Services interlocal agreement with Harris County Protective Services for Children and Adults, HCPSA, to provide community youth services for students and families in the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District. Any questions for Roy Garcia or Franklin Sampson?
I have a
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
Yes. Roy, just to confirm a couple of things. This is an agreement between Cy-Fair ISD and Harris County in which we split the cost of caseworkers or social workers who serve and provide many services to our students, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And this agreement is for the next school year, and it is for 18 social workers. I'm trying to remember, is that the same number as last year? Do you remember?
Yes, I think it was 2 years ago where we increased from 14
Right.
to 18 caseworkers.
I remember that. Okay. If you look at the number of students that were served last year, 2,929 students, and you divide that by 18, it's 162 students per social worker. I'm wondering is that, I mean, it sounds like a lot to me, but I know sometimes the services they provided were just short, one day or one call or one, but some may be more long-term. Do we feel that there might be a need for more, or is there even an opportunity to request more? I couldn't tell from the agreement, we're allocated a certain number, and I don't know if we can ask for more.
We are allocated a certain number, and we definitely can look at that need. However, it is something that Harris County, they have to approve that as well. Do they
Right.
have the budget in order to pay for that
The other half.
additional half of that? Like we did a couple of years ago, adding those 4. That took a little process for them to go through that and say, yes, we can pay for those 2, if you will, and then we paid for the other 2. In breaking down the numbers, you're right, there are some instances where it may be a mental health response, but that's when they assess and they bring in the mental health intervention team to assist with that, and then they follow up, of course, as needed. But all of them do not require the same amount of time.
Right. I just would like to better understand if we're seeing that there's a greater need, or just as our student population grows.
Sure. And what we can do, I'll be happy to work with Franklin and the team I know you received some data that you have spoken to, but we'll look at even more data, see what we can find and break that down, even more specifics so you can get a better understanding of where their time is and how their resources are allocated.
Okay, I don't want to create more work. I'm just thinking, if there's an opportunity to go and petition to the county to say, we would like to have an additional allotment.
Correct.
And we'd be willing to pay our half, and we're asking them
To do the same.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
we're-
We can definitely look at
Yeah,
that and see
okay.
what that may look like and
Okay.
what they can do for their next fiscal year.
Sure, and again, I understand that this would be something not for this year, but for
Sure.
moving forward, so I understand that.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? Want to move this to consent or stand alone? Consent, okay? All right. 10J, the board will consider approving the memorandum of understanding between Harris County Juvenile Board and Cypress-Fairbanks ISD to participate in the JJAEP for 2021-2022. Any questions for Mrs. Ogumake? Can we move this to consent? Okay, thank you. 10K, the board will consider approving, I'm sorry, was there a statement? Okay. The board, okay, thanks. 10K, the board will consider approving facilities for off-campus physical education for 2021-2022. Any questions for Dr. Heather Bergman? May we move this to consent? Yes, thank you. 10L, the board consider approving the list of advanced courses for 2021-2022. Any questions for Dr. Heather Bergman? Move that to consent? Okay. 10M, the board to consider awarding bids and contracts and are authorizing purchase orders as recommended in the posted agenda items. 10M1, art and miscellaneous school supplies. 10M2, Aruba Clear Pass upgrade. 10M3, assorted food for nutrition services 2021. 10M4, athletic and all activity student accident insurance renewal. 10M5, automotive hardware and fasteners. 10M6, automotive OEM proprietary parts and labor. 10M7, bananas for nutrition services. 10M8, CFISD Cisco core switching quote. 10M9, distributors catalog bid for nutrition services. 10M10, electrical supplies. 10M11, excess workers' compensation coverage renewal. 10M12, farm to school produce for nutrition services. 10M13, leave management software. 10M14, milk for high schools for nutrition services. 10M15, processed produce for nutrition services. 10M16, programming, inspection, and repair of fire alarm and sprinkler systems. 10M17, school liability, privacy and information, security, and automobile insurance renewal. 10M18, software license and maintenance renewal expansion. 10M19, whole produce for nutrition services. Any questions on any of these you want to talk to Bill Powell about? Does everybody want to take one and ask a question?
Are these bananas special? Are these bananas special? They got their own agenda item?
Okay.
Is this the same Aruba trip that was taken last year? Okay. All right.
Yes, Ms. Blackshire.
I would ask that item 10M3 be removed from consent agenda, as I will be abstaining from the vote on that item as my son works for Jake's Finer Foods. No, bananas are no issue.
Except when you're making banana cheesecakes. Okay. All right, so we're going to remove that one, and everything else is going to consent. 10N, the board will consider approving the CenterPoint Energy Houston Electric LLC blanket utility easement to provide overhead and underground electrical service at the existing CFISD Exhibit Center and authorize the superintendent or designee to negotiate the final terms and execute all related documents. Any questions for Mr. Morgan? Can we move that to consent? Want to stand alone? Consent? 10O, the board will consider approving the CenterPoint Energy Houston Electric LLC blanket utility easement to provide underground electrical service for new elementary school number 57 and authorize the superintendent or designee to negotiate the final terms and execute all related documents. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Morgan? May we move that to consent? Move to consent. 10P, the board will consider authorizing the administration to declare certain undeveloped district property as surplus and advertise the property for sale in accordance with the state law and board policy. This item may be discussed in closed session pursuant to section 551.072. We'll take that up in a little bit. 10Q, the board will review and consider taking action to revise the contract of employment for the superintendent. That's really sad there. Okay. We're going to take that up in closed session. And then 10R, the district will consider a level 4 appeal, C. Smith R. Keeling L. Sensel, of a level 3 decision. Again, this may be discussed in closed session. So, I must read aloud the next page. The board will now move to a closed session regarding agenda items 10P, 10Q, and 10R under the Texas Government Code Open Meetings Act for the purposes stated in the posting of this meeting. If the board determines that any final action, final vote, or decision, or any matter considered in the closed session is required, such final vote, action, and decision will be taken upon the reconvening of this meeting in open session or at a subsequent meeting of the board in open session after prior notice has been posted. May I have a motion to move to closed session?
I move we adjourn to closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. May I have a second?
That's second.
Thank you, Dr. Ogletree. All in favor, raise your right hand. And we're going to closed session. Thank you all for coming.
While they're setting it up.
Yes.